Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us from different regions. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Aquatic Food Fraud, Impacts on Markets and Consumers, and Tools to Fight It. My name is Hassan Abdullayev, and I will be facilitating today's session. This webinar is the first session of the FAO GLOBEFISH webinar series 2026. Today's topic is Aquatic Food Fraud. Today's webinar will explore these issues from several perspectives. Before we begin, allow me to briefly go through a few housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded. Participants are kindly requested to keep their microphones muted throughout the session. For questions, please use the question and answer function box. You may submit your questions at any time during the webinar. We will try to address as many questions as possible during the dedicated question and answer session. The webinar will include presentations, panel discussions, question and answer session, a short poll, and a brief summary of the pre-webinar survey results. We will now begin with the opening remarks. We are honored that Vera Agostini, Deputy Director of the FAO Fisheries and Aquaculture Division, has provided opening remarks for today's webinar. Unfortunately, Vera is not able to join us live today, but she has kindly shared a recorded message for this session. We will now play the opening remarks by Vera Agostini. Can you see my screen?
Dear colleagues, distinguished panelists, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this FAO GLOBEFISH webinar on aquatic food fraud, impacts on markets and consumers, and tools to fight it. Today's session marks the launch of a new webinar series organized by the FAO GLOBEFISH project to explore key issues shaping international fisheries and aquaculture trade and markets. So let me begin by congratulating the FAO GLOBEFISH team on this important initiative that will bring together a diverse group of topics, experts, and stakeholders from across the aquatic food sector. At a time when transparency, traceability, and consumer trust are more important than ever, these conversations are essential, and FAO GLOBEFISH continues to play a unique role not only as a source of market and trade information and analysis, but also as a platform for dialogue, exchange, and collaboration across the sector. For more than 4 decades, FAO GLOBEFISH has supported governments, industry, researchers, and other stakeholders with impartial and accessible information on fisheries and aquaculture trade and markets. Its work on market intelligence, trade flows, price trends, market access, commodity updates, and emerging trade issues contributes to a better understanding of the global aquatic food economy. This is especially important at a time when markets are becoming more complex. Value chains are becoming more generalized. Stakeholders need reliable information to make informed decisions. Today's webinar focuses on an issue that sits at the intersection of markets, regulation, consumer protection, food safety, and sustainability. And that is food fraud in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. Now, fraud in fisheries and aquaculture products can take a number of forms. These include mislabeling, species substitution, false claims about origin or production method, adulteration, counterfeiting, and other practices that can lead to misinterpretations. While these practices may sometimes appear to be technical or commercial issues, their consequences are actually much broader. Food fraud, for example, can undermine consumer trust. It can distort markets and create unfair competition for legitimate operators who invest in quality, compliance, and transparency. It can also have implications for food safety particularly where substitution or undeclared treatments expose consumers to allergen, pathogens, contaminants, or other hazards. It can also weaken sustainability efforts when products linked to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing are able to enter legal markets through false documentation or misleading claims. This is why today's discussion is so important. This webinar provides an opportunity to examine the market incentives and supply chain conditions that allow fraudulent practices to occur. It will also allow us to hear from experts working on food safety, trade, retail, consumer protection, industry standards, and transparency. Aquatic foods make a vital contribution to food security, nutrition, livelihoods, and trade. Protecting the integrity of these products is therefore not only a market concern, it is also part of ensuring that fisheries and aquaculture value chains remain fair, safe, sustainable, and trusted. In closing, I would like to thank all panelists for sharing their time and expertise, and all participants for joining this important discussion. I also thank the FAO GLOBEFISH team for organizing this webinar and for continuing to provide a space where emerging trade and market issues can be examined in an open, evidence-based, and practical way. I'm going to finish with telling you that I wish you all a productive and engaging webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Vera Agostini for these opening remarks and for setting the scene for today's discussion. We will now move to the first presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Esther Garrido Camaro, Fishery Officer in the FAO Fisheries and Aquaculture Division. Esther is a nutritionist and food scientist with 18 years of experience in food safety and quality. She has worked for the past 14 years as a fishery officer at FAO headquarters in Rome, contributing to the development of international standards, including those of the Codex Alimentarius, by providing scientific advice on the safety and quality of aquatic products. She has also supported global cooperation programs aimed at strengthening food safety systems in the aquatic sector and, before joining FAO, worked in the private sector in production, food safety, quality management, and certification. Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hassan. And good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and for being here today. I see a lot of familiar names in the list of attendees, so thank you very much. Today I'll be presenting a report that was published back in February during the World Seafood Congress. It is a report on food fraud in fisheries and aquaculture, and it highlights what's the situation. It has received a lot of attention, and I believe that this is a problem that is of great interest also to the general public, and that's why we have received so much attention after the publication of this report. And I believe that some of the figures also have been a wake-up call for many. We're going to be looking at some of the figures and some of the percentage that the studies are pointing out, and reflecting on some of those figures that we find in the different studies. Also, we are going to be reflecting on the food safety implications that food fraud has. There are complex situations in which there are food safety issues that are linked to the fact that a product is not what is supposed to be, and also issues when a product is adulterated, or I mean, there are several issues, and we also will go through those issues today. And then I will leave the floor to Christina from our joint center to talk about other aspects related to the same report, more linked to the analytical techniques that can be used for verification. So let's say that this sector, that our fisheries and aquaculture sector is quite complex. There is a wide variety of species that are traded, more than 12,000, and that is, and I mean, we cannot compare the number of species with any other sector. Aquaculture is growing. Right now, at our latest SOFIA, we see that aquaculture accounted for 52.8% of the global production of aquatic animals. And one would think, well, that will make it easier. It will make it easier, but again, we can't compare not either the aquaculture sector with any other terrestrial animal production system. We're talking about around 700 aquatic species that are farmed. So it's very, very complex. And that means that there are multiple competent authorities involved in the sector, and that makes the sector very vulnerable. We have very complex supply chains. The aquatic products are traded globally. The sector produced over 235 million tons of aquatic products in 2024, according to the last SOFIA that was launched 2 days ago, and that is valued in 565 billion USD. So we are talking about a very complex sector, and that makes it especially susceptible to fraud. According to the studies that we've been reviewing, the probability of fraud is around 20% in our sector. That varies, of course, depending on the geographical area, the species that are involved. But let's say that that's the minimum we find reported in the reports. And there are studies pointing at a 21% globally, which is significantly higher than that of meat with 13%, or that of fruits and vegetables with 10%. And of course, the most frequently reported types of fraud are species substitution and mislabeling. I brought today some of the studies for you to understand how important this problem of food fraud is in our sector. And I brought 5 studies today. The first one I would like to mention is one from the European Union, where they discovered that 1/3 of mass catheters served mislabeled seafood in pangasius, which was frequently used as a substitute. And then in restaurants, there was a misdescription rate that was significantly higher than in retail settings, with 30% of seafood products mislabeled. We see that fraud occurs at all stages of the value chain, but the latest we check, the higher the percentage, because it becomes more and more difficult to understand what sort of species we have in front of us. Without skin, without any sort of sign of what they are, just fillets, it becomes more and more difficult to understand what sort of products we are consuming. Then in Peru, for instance, we have a study that talks about seafood fraud detected in 43% of the samples that were tested, with particularly high rates in ceviche with 78% and sashimi 28%. Or this other study in China that points out that 75.5% of tested seafood products that were identified as species outside the expected family that they were claiming to be. And then there is a very interesting study from Oceana that was carried out 10 years ago. And that study found that 1 in 5 of over 25,000 seafood samples that were tested were mislabeled under the name of other species. And as I said, that occurs at every stage of the value chains. And the cases were reported in 55 countries across all continents except from Antarctica. And hake scholar and Asian catfish were among the most substituted species. And that study is like a wake-up call for me. And what is alarming from a food safety perspective, I'm a food safety expert, is that 58% of substitutions involve species that pose health risk to consumers. So that's something that we need to consider. We are not only talking about an economic impact, we are talking about difficulties to protect consumers when we talk about food fraud in our sector. I brought today the categorization of fraud according to FAO and according to this report. It was a little bit challenging to do this. Food fraud had already been classified for the food sector, but then we came out with a sort of reclassification within our sector. Of course, we have adulteration, which is very common in our sector and also in other food sectors, which implies the addition of a fraudulent substance to the final product. Counterfeit, that occurs when all aspects of a high-value aquatic product are replicated in a fraudulent food product. It is packed to make it look like the original. Then we have simulation, which involves creating a product that resembles a high-value aquatic commodity without being an exact copy. It's a creation of a fake version of the original commodity. Then we have diversion, which is the sale or redistribution of a legitimate product outside their intended markets. Then we have a misbranding, which is providing false or misleading information in packaging, but also in the marketing. It goes beyond what we consider mislabel, which occurs when a legitimate product is and packaging are fraudulently used, and species substitution, which is the most common type of fraud in our sector, which involves replacing a high-value species with a cheaper one for economic gain. Then theft, which occurs when a product is stolen and then passed off as if it were a legitimately procured product. And then overrun, which occurs when a legitimate product is produced over the limit, which is an example I like to use in our sector is when we end up catching above the established quotas, and then these products enter the markets. So there are a number of problems that we can have when it comes to fraud, and as I said, some of them have food safety implications. Something I like also to highlight, and sometimes it's not a food safety issue, but more a quality issue, and this is the case when we talk about the addition of water or ice or other fillers that are added to increase the weight of the product. That's quite common in our sector and probably deserves some discussion. But it can have very serious implications when it comes to the addition of certain substances, like, for example, carbon monoxide to enhance the red color of species like tuna, and that's risky. And well, not always species that are not supposed to be used. Sometimes we use products that are above the limits, knowing that we are adding much more than we should just to improve color or the appearance, to look fresher, etc., etc. And then we can be putting consumers at risk. And then there are also problems when it comes to a species substitution or mislabeling. Some cases that I like to mention is, for example, when we substitute species and then we end up with toxic species on our plates, the case of pufferfish, or for example, when it comes to having marine biotoxins in some species that are not supposed to be catch, or some species that are not supposed to be harvest at certain point because of closures of the area that are usually due to risk management decisions taken based on the presence of certain pathogens or toxins in the water, very common with filter feeders, mussels, oysters. This is also common and very risky for consumers. It happens also with species substitution that we might end up consuming products that were never intended to be consumed raw. There was a case I remember some years ago in Singapore, and then consumers ended up consuming a very traditional dish that was supposed to be prepared with certain species that can be consumed raw, and instead of those species, they ended up consuming tilapia, and that created a food safety problem and a foodborne outbreak that was very, very serious. So all those issues with species substitution and other types of fraud, like the one I explained that is related to the harvesting of the species that are not supposed to be harvested but enter the market anyway, can put consumers at risk. And then we have, for example, residues of veterinary drugs due to mislabeling. When, for example, we see products that are labeled as wild and then they end up to be farmed. In those cases, even products follow a different inspection protocol and will never be tested for antimicrobials. So we wouldn't know if it's not for specific studies that are targeting fraud that this is happening. So the food safety angle shouldn't be missed in this issue of food fraud. It's not always a problem, but in occasions it has food safety implications. And then why there is fraud? Of course, because there is an economic benefit, and the price differentials of substitute species can range from plus 25 euros to minus 12 euro, with sturgeon caviar having the greatest price differential. Also, for example, there is a price differential of 10 euro for yellowfin tuna when used as substitute of Atlantic bluefin and big eye tuna, and Atlantic salmon labeled as Pacific salmon with an average profit of 9 euros. So it's obviously it happens because it can be very, very profitable. And there is a chapter in the report that talks about these price differentials. And the report contains a number of tools that we can use. Some of them are something that mostly any nation could use, like understanding taxonomy, the use of standards, having the appropriate legislation, or the use of simple inspection methodologies like visual inspection, organoleptic inspection, or the use of mass balance, for instance. I remember once that we had a suspicion that someone was committing fraud, and obviously it was when one processor alone was producing more than the whole denomination of origin itself could produce. So with a simple mass balance that has no cost, you can detect a fraudulent practice. So then there are the analytical methods that are more costly, and not everyone can apply. Not everyone has the capacity. Not all the nations have the capacity to verify that fraud is going on. But let's focus on the first, taxonomy. It's very common to misidentify species. Sometimes it's not intentional. And for this, it's very important to understand the morphology, the taxonomy of fish. There are more than 36 species of finfish that have been described. And as I said before, 12,000 of them are important in terms of trade. The amount of information required to distinguish among them is not always available to the lack of up-to-date taxonomic guides at the country, regional, and global level. But FAO has been working a lot on the provision of tools and provides global level species catalogs and regional and field species identification guides through this FAO Fish Finder Species Identification and Data Program. And I will invite all of you to visit these tools. You can find the relevant information and links and sources in the publication. Then there are a number of codex standards. Some of them do not explicitly, well, some of them no, most of them do not mention specifically fraud, but they are great tools to fight it because they talk about how to label, how to pack. And we have, for example, the general standard for labeling of pre-packed foods, the general standard for labeling of food additives when sold as such, the principles for traceability, product tracing as a tool within a food inspection and certification system, and the principles and guidelines for national food control systems. I mean, there are all sort of documents that can be of great help in the fight against food fraud. And then there is a specific guideline on the prevention and control of food fraud that is currently under development. So that's going to be an additional tool to fight fraud in the sector. And there might be a need also to have tools that are specific to our sector, fisheries and aquaculture. We can discuss about this more later today. And then there is legislation. So not only that the legislation has to be in line with codex text, but also there are additional tools that we can use in our regulations, so that can influence our regulations, like the FAO voluntary guidelines for catch documentation schemes, the agreement on port state measures, the United Nations Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods, and the International Institute for the Unification of Private Laws, Principles of International Commercial Contracts. Just to mention some of them. There is a longer list. You can find everything in the report. And then, of course, there are analytical techniques that we can use to verify and to monitor every now and then that things are happening as they should be happening. Christina is going to be talking about those today, mostly about DNA-based techniques, because when it comes to species restitution, this is one of the, this is what one has to do, but also about others. For example, when it comes to adulteration, she's going to be mentioning chromatography, or when it comes to geographical origin claims, we can use isotope analysis, or when it comes to mislabeling regarding fresh products with previously frozen products, we can use spectroscopy, enzymatic methods, electrophoresis, DNA degradation, measurement of volatile composition, the study of the morphology or organoleptic situation, which are relatively cheap techniques, the study of microbiological activity, or a combination of techniques. She's going to be talking in detail about those. So as a conclusion and recommendation, I would say that addressing these challenges requires a collaborative effort from all the stakeholders, and I think that that's why we're here today. There is a need to have stringent regulations and robust traceability systems. This is also of great importance in the fight against food fraud. Education of the sector and consumer awareness play a crucial role, and Roy is going to be talking about that later on. And having scientifically robust analytical techniques will help a lot in the fight against food fraud. And with this, I give the floor back to Hassan for the next presentation, the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Esther, for your presentation and for providing an overview of the issue from the FAO perspective. We will now move to the second presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kristina Vlacho, Laboratory Head of the Food Safety and Control Laboratory of the Joint FAO IAEA Center of Nuclear Techniques in Food and Agriculture. Dr. Vlacho has a background in chemistry, toxicology, and quality assurance. The Joint FAO IAEA Center supports countries in improving analytical and regulatory practices and methodologies in food safety, authenticity, and traceability, helping to safeguard the consumer health, facilitate international trade, and enhance food security. Dr. Vlacho is also the responsible officer for the coordinated research project Seafood Origin and Authenticity using nuclear and related technologies, launched by the Joint Center to support countries in detecting and preventing fraud in fisheries and aquaculture products and strengthening food control systems. Kristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Great. So thank you so very much for this kind introduction and for the opportunity to present the work of the joint FAO IAEA Center in the field of food safety and food authenticity, including, of course, safety and authenticity in fisheries and aquaculture sectors. I had a great pleasure to contribute to the chapter of analytical methods in the report that Esther presented previously. Can you see my slides? Perfect. So then it's my great pleasure. Need some time to move. I think you still see my first slide, right?
Yes.
Because I don't see it moving. Oh, yes, now it comes. Then I would like to introduce the work of the joint FAO IAEA Center first. So this unique partnership between two UN organizations, FAO and IAEA, is already established 61 years ago to promote the safe and appropriate use of nuclear and related technologies in food and agriculture. And as you can see here, the structure comprises 5 sections and 5 affiliated laboratories. The sections are based in Vienna and the laboratories in Cybersdorf, close to Vienna. So it's a unique partnership, and the main activities are to support and coordinate research and development activities, not only in the labs, but also through coordinated research projects, supporting member countries of FAO and IAEA to work on food safety and food authenticity applications in their own laboratories and develop new analytical methodologies. And then, of course, there is a very important part of capacity building and technology transfer for the member countries, technical support and advice from technical officers in the Joint Center, and also networking and partnership. As you can see, my laboratory is one of the 5 laboratories. It's a food safety and control laboratory. And our core activities are research and development and capacity building. Regarding research, we use nuclear, isotopic, and some complementary analytical techniques to develop new analytical methods for assessing food safety and food authenticity. The ultimate goal is to transfer these analytical methods to the member countries, the member states' laboratories. So we don't do routine analysis in our laboratory. We are developing the application, we are validating the analytical method, and then this is transferred to the laboratories that have requested the specific application. And the second part of our mandate is knowledge and technology transfer through fellowships that we host in the lab, workshops and training courses, and also internships. I have here an overview, a panorama of the analytical techniques that we use in our laboratory to develop analytical methods for food testing, for food safety and authenticity. And we have established a two-tier approach in chemical analysis. Tier 1, step 1, is rapid screening with small-sized instruments, even portable, that can be operated even outside of the laboratory and give very fast analysis as a first step. So with these rapid screening techniques, we can rapidly analyze a large number of samples, identify positive, problematic samples, and then only for these problematic positive samples go for further confirmatory analysis, which of course will require more sophisticated analytical methods, more qualification from the staff, and also advanced equipment. But this two-tier, two-steps approach is really very important for the member states, member countries, because some countries or laboratories in developing countries, they have limited resources to implement monitoring regarding food safety and authenticity. And on the other side, the rapid screening technologies can be used for rapid analysis also in case of emergencies in the food supply. Perhaps we all remember that during COVID, not all food or chemist analysts could go to the laboratory and work because of the restrictions, because of the COVID, or some natural catastrophes can again impact laboratories. And then we need some alternative analysis tools. You can see here some of my colleagues working with rapid screening technologies and developing analytical methods. For example, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy is a non-destructive but very useful technique for a multi-element analysis in food, focused not only on toxic metals, but also on essential metal analysis. Then SARES, Raman spectroscopy, surface enhanced Raman spectroscopy, SARES, that you see here in the middle, is a portable device that you can use for the detection of different mycotoxins and residues of pesticides. And we have already developed analytical methods to detect, for example, pesticide residue on the peel of fruit, or we can do it also in case of seafood and fish, in the flesh of fish to detect veterinary drug residues. Then very small pocket size electrochemical sensors can be used outside of the laboratory as well to detect and quantify heavy metals and mycotoxins and other aquatic toxins, pesticide and veterinary drug residues in different food matrices. We have also analytical methods to detect food fraud and adulteration. For example, these portable, again, pocket-sized sensors to detect fraud in olive oil. Nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR, which is now a small instrument, benchtop, and really affordable, because when I was a PhD student, NMR facility would take the space of one room, and it was super expensive, and it required specific operation conditions, and IR spectroscopy that we use very much for rapid analysis. Now, of course, the confirmatory analysis, as discussed, requires more qualification from the staff and, of course, more advanced analytical methods. Here you can see our facility of stable isotope analysis, GC and LC MSMS, and ICP-MS for multi-element analysis in food and, of course, in seafood, and linked to liquid chromatography also for metal speciation, for example, for methyl mercury in fish. Now, as Hassan mentioned, I'm very happy to be the responsible officer for a new coordinated research project that was launched this year, entitled Seafood Origin and Authenticity Using Nuclear and Related Technologies. And just to give some information about coordinated research projects, these are projects within which the Joint Center launches a topic for research that has been identified together with international experts, so international consultation. In this case, it was the big issue of fraud in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. And then, after the launching of the project, laboratories and competent authorities from the member states, from the member countries, institutes of research, academia, and also laboratories involved in official food control, they submit proposals for research to the Joint Center. Some of them are selected, the best of them are selected, and then these institutes receive funding from the Joint Center to conduct research over usually 5 years and develop analytical methods and tools focused on the specific topic of fraud, in that case, in the seafood and fish, and also focused on using nuclear and isotopic techniques for developing these applications. So the expected outputs from this project is, of course, new analytical methods, protocols, standard operating procedures, and guidelines. Most importantly, databases of authentic fish and seafood, and capacity building material to support the further dissemination of the knowledge that will be acquired. And this will be also implemented through publications, technical documents, project reports, and also peer-reviewed papers. I will skip this slide because this is what Esther already presented as main issues of fraud in the sector, and I will go to the next slide. So this is one of the techniques that we use in our laboratory, the isotope ratio mass spectrometry, as a tool for creating unique isotopic fingerprints for aquatic food authentication. And this technique is focusing on measuring the ratios of isotopes of stable isotopes of light elements like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur. And measuring the ratios of these stable isotopes of these elements gives invaluable information regarding food authenticity and origin. For example, for the geographical origin, the variation of the ratios of hydrogen and oxygen isotopes in water depends on latitude, temperature, and evaporation. And using these ratios, we can have really isotopic fingerprints that support the geographical origin verification. Then for the discrimination between wild-caught and farmed fish and seafood, we use nitrogen and carbon isotope analysis because these ratios vary by diet mainly, and we can also verify organic production claims with nitrogen isotope measurement because this helps us to track for separating organic from conventionally farmed products. I give you here the preliminary results of a study that is now being conducted in my laboratory regarding the differentiation of wild-caught versus farmed fish, specifically to verify wild-caught salmon claims. And this study is based on carbon and nitrogen stable isotope measurement. We did it in two ways, one in the whole salmon tissue and one time on the corresponding protein fraction after lipid extraction. And we can see here, although up to now, we have only a limited number of samples, that there is a clustering of aquaculture samples that are pink here and wild-caught that are here light blue. Then I will go to another technique or two techniques that really sometimes are paired with isotope ratio mass spectrometry to build irrefutable geographical and biological profiles. One technique is X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy. So using X-rays, we can analyze simultaneously a large number of elements that are present in fish and seafood, and we have started in our laboratory developing analytical methods with this technique as well, because it is non-destructive and it requires only a very rapid application. It can also be a portable device that can be used outside of the laboratory environment, for example, at the marketplace or for border control, or any other kind of out-of-the-lab application. And for the confirmatory part of multi-element and both toxic elements and essential elements is the ICP-MS, inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, which is based on plasma technology. And with this technology, with only one sample preparation, we can analyze simultaneously literally the whole, all the elements in the periodic table of elements. And we have already developed analytical methods for elemental profiling in fish. And we have transferred these methods to several laboratories in the member states. Linking the liquid chromatography with ICP-MS gives another great opportunity to have analysis of methyl mercury in fish and other metal species, for example, inorganic arsenic in rice. Going to nuclear magnetic resonance, I already mentioned that now we have low field NMR, which is benchtop and also affordable for the country's laboratories. And this technique can be used for fresh and frozen, for discriminating fresh fish from frozen and thawed, because there are changes in metabolic state and ice crystal damage that can be detected with this technology. Again, differentiation of wild-caught versus farmed fish, based mainly on fatty acid profiles, driven by diets, and it is also it has also been used for species identification as a complementary method to the golden standard technique that is molecular DNA analysis for the species verification. All these techniques create metabolic profiles, so the chemical signature of polar and lipid fractions in the flesh of fish and seafood.
Christina, may I kindly ask you, in the interest of time, start
Yes,
your
I think
conclusion?
I have only 1 or 2 slides. The
Thank you.
monitoring of antimicrobial residues in fish and seafood is not only to detect if any prohibited, for example, veterinary drug residues have been used in fish, but also to see the presence of veterinary drug residue, which would disclose, for example, mislabeling of farmed fish as wild caught. And we have the radioreceptor assay with liquid scintillation that is used for rapid detection of families of many veterinary drug residues and antimicrobial residues, and for the confirmatory approach, the isotope dilution LCMSMS. And for the more rapid methods, we have with infrared spectroscopy, which can be benchtop or even these small portable sensors. And we have started already in the lab to develop analytical methods for differentiation of wild and farmed fish and for species differentiation. And it works, although we have, for now, limited number of samples, and we will follow up with more samples. And it is great that portable sensors work as a first tier analysis. And also ion mobility spectrometry, which gives a volatile fingerprint of fish and food. And then one more recent application, we were asked by institute in Chile to have an application to differentiate the geographical origin of mussels, which is an important commodity in the country, with infrared spectroscopy. And we have used both benchtop and portable sensors. And you can see here from the results, really the clear distinction between the two different regions. This was very important for Chile because in some of the regions, as Esther mentioned, there is pollution, aquatic pollution, that would affect the quality and safety of the product. And this is a QR code and a link linking to the virtual visit of our laboratory, the Food Safety and Control Laboratory. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope that I didn't take much more of the designated time, and I will be very happy to answer any questions. Then I give the floor back to Hassan.
Thank you very much, Christina, for your presentation. We will now move to the panel discussion. This discussion will be moderated by Dr. Esther Garrido Camaro. But before we begin, may I kindly remind all the panelists to keep their interventions within the allocated time so that we can hear from everyone and leave enough time for questions from the audience. With that, Esther, I now give the floor back to you to introduce the panel and begin the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, San. So now we're going to have our panel providing very relevant information about this issue and different perspectives from different actors. We're starting with the industry with Mark Bowen. Mark Bowen is the Regulatory Program Manager at the National Fisheries Institute in the United States. And in that role, he works with Better Seafood Board, an affiliate organization of the NFI, and all the science and regulatory issues on behalf of NFI members. He has worked with the seafood industry members to develop guidance materials for addressing and reducing instances of seafood fraud. He has also collaborated with members of the other associations to develop a specification templates for seafood purchases, which can be customized to individual needs. And along with other NFI staff, he has conducted webinars to build awareness of good practices for labeling and other methods to mitigate inadvertent mislabeled of seafood. So with Mark, we have the perspective of the industry, and I will be asking a number of questions that Mark would kindly answer or try to answer with a very short presentation. From an industry perspective, Mark, what are the main drivers of food fraud in fisheries and aquaculture, and how the private sector using technology can address fraud? What role do industry lead initiatives and voluntary commitments play in strengthening integrity? That's also important for us to understand. Where do you see tensions between commercial competitiveness and transparency? What incentives are most effective in encouraging companies to invest in fraud prevention? And lastly, and very important for us, how can FAO facilitate alignments between public regulations and private sector initiatives? Back to you, Mark.
Okay, would you like for me to address those questions first or to go to the short presentation first?
You can start the presentation, Mark, and while you are presenting the role of NFI, et cetera, maybe you can answer those questions.
Okay, I'll try to work in that in then. Okay, thank you.
We see your screen, Mark.
Yes, I'm trying to get to presenter mode.
I think you are.
Okay, am I in presenter mode?
I think.
Let me try to, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Trying to get that loaded up there. As I mentioned, I'm with the National Fisheries Institute, which is the principal seafood trade association in the United States. So I just want to talk a bit about the Better Seafood Board and our Economic Integrity Initiative. So about 20 years ago in 2006, the board of the National Fisheries Institute approved an Economic Integrity Initiative. And so the whole goal was to increase consumer confidence in seafood products and eliminate the economic disadvantage for following the rules, and then also to develop a process for accountability. So the main part of that effort was to form the Better Seafood Board. So this is basically functions as a separate organization, separate from the National Fisheries Institute, but yet we're still a part of it. We're affiliated with it. And we have a board of managers that manages the organization. And the sole focus of our group is to address seafood fraud. And I work with that group. I'm the staff lead for that group. As part of that initiative, we have a pledge that we ask all of the NFI members to sign. And here's just a screenshot of the pledge. It's a one-page pledge, pretty straightforward, with a signature blank there at the bottom. And then I'll just go briefly through, what that covers. It talks about, that products are correctly labeled for weights and counts. The products are correctly labeled for identity and species are not substituted. The products are correctly labeled for the country of origin. They're correctly labeled for added ingredients and also labeled for to be truthful and not misleading. And along the way, the Better Seafood Board has developed different materials to help out the industry. We have a number of materials available on our website, which I could direct you to, and you could go searching for those as well. The few main materials I wanted to mention are our best practices for addressing seafood fraud. This was developed about 10 years ago. We had a request from the Food and Drug Administration of the U.S. government for the industry to develop guidance materials. And they felt that it would be better for industry to develop our own materials rather than something to come out from the government. So this was done as part of that effort. We had a group of volunteers who work in the industry who were formative in getting this developed and basically did all of the edits and the final approval of this. So this is available on the NFI website. We also I worked with the FMI Seafood Strategy Committee. FMI is now initials for the Food Industry Association, which is a group of major grocery store retailers in the United States. We worked together with them to develop specification templates, and this is essentially to give buyers a template they can use to design to their own needs so that to make sure they get the product that they want and it fits all the specifications.